The following content is not suitable for children.
Today, Lori, we're going to explore the secrets of the erotic mind. Let's jump in. What about your fantasies, Lori? What's going up there in that brain of yours?
I fantasize about being Tom Brady's wife.
Ooh. Collecting all those Super Bowl rings?
No, just because I'd be Giselle and I'd be like thin and young and tall. Welcome to Foreplay Radio, Couples and Sex Therapy. I'm Lori Watson, your sex therapist.
And I'm George Fowler, your couples therapist.
And we are passionate about talking about sex and helping you develop a way to talk to each other.
Our mission is to help our audience develop a healthier relationship to sex that integrates the mind, the heart, and the body.
We got to say, too, about our sponsors, Uberlube, Manscaped, Oh My God, yes, and Addy. You know, I went to the FDA to help get Addy approved, and we only take sponsors with products that we really believe in, do something good. I mean, we are approached all the time with all kinds of products and stuff that we turn down. So we're recommending things that we have recommended to patients that we've seen as a good product, a healthy product, something that we think will help you.
Something that's promoting healthy sex. Really, that's our mission. And all these products are just trying to move the needle and get people more comfortable talking about sex and enjoying sex. So we really appreciate that partnership. I don't know, Lori, about this Tom Brady fantasy or Giselle. I know your husband, Derek's a Chiefs fan, and you're portraying him on a lot of levels here. So might have to delete this off the podcast.
Yeah, maybe so. He listens to all of them, so he might be pretty upset about that.
Derek, I tried to have you back, buddy.
Gee, I've been thinking about your name. I've decided to call you a different G name every episode. You know, we got G-Spot, G-String, G-Whiz.
What do you got for me today? What's my new G name?
How about G-String? That's a sexy
G-String?
one. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so we got to talk about the secrets to the erotic mind. What questions have you got here, George? You're talking about women, what women think about?
Well, I think most of the time when we do the best sex breakdown and we go to the thinking mind, I was always surprised at how you often talk about women. Really, this is critical for their engagement, right? To really get that erotic mind up and running. You know, they don't have high testosterone. You know, they need to get that mind working. And, you know, I think a lot of men have no idea what's going on in that erotic mind. So that's a very vague word to me. Like, So are they thinking about old fantasies, old memories? Are they thinking about a book they read, a movie they saw, a little of everything? Like, what is going on in that erotic mind?
Yes,
This is a chance for us to kind of get invited into this mysterious place that, you know, the eyes are closed and you can see something going on up there, but, you know, there's often very little communication.
First of all, I got to say, I love that you're curious. I mean, I think sometimes one of the fears about sharing that as women is that their partner will be threatened or their partner won't want to know those kinds of things. So I think what you're saying, and I certainly hear it the other way too, many men are infinitely curious about, you know, how women think about sex, how they fantasize about it, what is going on inside their mind. So where do we start? Help me
Well,
here.
you've worked with so many thousands of people, and, you know, what are some of the input that you've heard from different women, if we're focusing on women here?
Sure. So first, I would say women think about everything, absolutely everything. And
We're not talking about the dishes and the laundry.
No,
list. We're putting that aside.
sexually.
Right.
I think they think about everything. There probably is no limit to their fantasies. And I tend to think nobody really owns our mind. I think that, you know, if you use it to stimulate yourself sexually to get aroused, that can be a good thing. I don't tend to be very judgmental about people's sexual fantasies. I think sometimes a sexual fantasy is important to understanding the self and understanding what's going on relationally, but not always. I mean, you can have crazy, wild stuff going on in your mind. It could be good.
Right.
I know, a lot of women experience shame over their fantasies. They think this is immoral or it's politically incorrect. Those are kind of the two categories that then they inhibit thinking about it. But I don't know. I don't think that this is a bad thing. I know people are worried about lust and this is going to lead them astray. And I think there really is something about just sexual content that is so exciting and so fun to think about versus deliberately directing your thoughts toward leaving the marriage or leaving the partnership. So that's kind of how I distinguish.
I love that line when you say nobody owns our mind, right? That's where we can be free to go where we want to go. And I think that's so important. And our stance with fantasy has always been, if it's something that increases levels of engagement, it keeps you present. If it's a quality of great sex and love and it strengthens the bond, then it's bring it in. If it creates more distance, the proof is in what the fantasies do. So I know with a lot of men, if they have to fantasize about someone else to get aroused and they're not present with their partner and they're disconnecting from their body, that fantasy actually creates more distance, right? So again, I'm just curious when you're saying, all women are doing this, they're closing their eyes and they're going somewhere. Like, how is that increasing their presence? Like, what's going on? I know there's a whole spectrum here, but this is just our chance to get specific here, Lori. Like, what are they fantasizing about?
Well, first, I would say they're not just fantasizing in the moment. I wish they would a little bit because it would help them. But sometimes just during the day, they can have a dream or an imagination or, like you said, a memory, something that's kind of exciting, something to noodle on, something to maybe enliven the day a bit that can be sexy. And I, think that it could be really graphic. I think that women tend to have a bit more of a romantic narrative included in their sexual fantasies. I talk to men and women, and men seem to be more regularly always graphic about their sexual fantasies. And women, this is the billion-dollar industry of romantic books. There's kind of themes. And I was reading in that book that we both have, the Billion Wicked Thoughts book, and they did two passages, sexy passages. And one of them was, interestingly, from the very first romantic novel I ever read. I was in high school. It was called The Flame and the Flower, and it was a book that kind of revolutionized women's romance novels. I think it was one of the more explicit books. And don't ask me how I got it in high school, because I am certain I did not buy it. I don't think a girlfriend gave it to me. I think it was truly in our library in high school. This was like really dirty stuff,
Risky.
And I remember reading it in the library going, wow. But they still, even though it was really explicit sex scenes, they compared that to a male written book, a book written by a man who was even more graphic and with kind of less emotional content. So I think when I say emotional content, maybe men think it's, it's all hearts and flowers. And romantic novels, they do a lot of buildup. They do the... I think what is probably most exciting to me about a romantic novel is tension. Tension is very exciting.
Well, we're going to get more specific when we come back from break. I like this idea of different themes. What are these erotic themes that, let's break them down into categories and get a little bit more details.
Okay. Way to add excitement to the moment is with Uberlube. It's this really slick lubricant that doesn't do some of the bad things that lubricants do. It's thin. It actually feels a lot more like a woman's natural lubrication. And I highly recommend it for beginning sexual touching on a man, on a woman. Just start off that way. It helps touching, and it's long lasting. It's scent-free, taste-free. You can switch from oral sex, intercourse, back and forth. It's easy, or touching. There's 4 ingredients. There's 3 types of high-grade silicone, and there's just a little bit of vitamin E, which kind of helps our vulva. It's great. Doesn't impact your pH, your hormones. It's recommended by doctors, recommended by myself.
I love your energy as you talk about it. And how do you spell that, Lori? Uberlube.
UberLube.com, and use the coupon foreplay for 10% off. We have a new sponsor, omgyes.com. And this is
Let me say that, Lori.
Okay.
omgyes.com.
/foreplay to support us at the podcast. And it is a website that shows sexual technique on women. And so many men are curious about, how do I touch a woman? This is naked bodies. I know some of you may not go for that, but it is a beautiful website. I've used it and recommended it for years. They even have like a computer generated vulva that you can touch and learn technique from. It's pretty fabulous. They give labels and words for different techniques so that 2 people can begin to understand each other. I want tapping, I want circling, I want this. It's really a beautiful place. omgyes.com /foreplay. And we just want to say one little extra thing here, that they are reaching out to therapists so that you can find this resource and use it free. You can go ahead, and on our website, we will have a way to reach OMG Yes if you're a therapist, to get the free sample of what this looks like. Right. So you can tell your patients.
We are partnering with them because they are really advancing the mission of healthy sex to really help women and men learn a beautiful way of just being more engaged. Way to go, OMG Yes. All right. What do you think, Lori? Let's go to this mysterious world. You're feeling a bit vague on me. You got a lot of themes and possibilities and erotic books and the flame in the flower. I still don't know what those eyes are closed. What is going on in that brain? So what is it about that first sex scene that you're going to hold on to? Would that be something that, later on will come back in a fantasy, like replaying that scene? Or is it like inserting yourself in that scene? Or, what do your clients tell you?
I mean, I would say, reading a sex scene is arousing. I mean, just right there, it's arousing. So definitely, want to have sex at that moment. Kind of, I think for me, no, it's not necessarily seeing myself. Oh, that's not true. Let's see. What is it? It's a hookup. It's a book hookup. That first sex scene is great. And then after that, I could care less. What is it about the first sex scene?
I wish I could help more, Lori. This is where us men often feel shut out. Again, when you go to the flame in the flower, right? I can see, for like a man watching pornography, there's something visual, you're seeing it, so that makes an impression. You can go back to that image. Mm-hmm. You're talking about reading something, the popularity of erotic novels, right? That you just read that first hookup scene in that book, and so how does that replay itself as, you're in bed with your lover?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose you see yourself in it. I think just the images that you're seeing as you're reading it are erotic and exciting, and your body responds to that. I think your body responds to content that is sexual. I mean, anytime you're reading, thinking about that, it's a turn on. Mm-hmm.
So you can bring back.
Can I bring it back into a moment with my husband? I don't think that's necessarily. It's almost like it goes into the bank more than it is necessarily something that a woman needs to recreate. It's sort of like it keeps the sexual fire going. Thinking about it, having sexual content as part of your life.
I totally get outside the bedroom and how that fills the bank. I'm still trying to figure out what happens during sex. Where does that erotic mind go towards?
I suppose that during sex, it could be, yes, maybe an image that you've read about, maybe the memory.
So
I think that for some women, it's the emotional connection. They need emotional connection. I think for others of us, it is kind of graphic sex that we might be thinking about. An act that was really good. In my life, I have a couple of memories, very salient memories that I pull on that to, remind me of those feelings. I think because as a woman, you don't really have the fire that hits you. A memory is a way that, as your mind thinks about it, that great memory of maybe a touch or an orgasm or a scene, with your lover. I mean, that turns your body on.
The women you work with might be going back in time to a memory of something that happened.
Yes.
Or they might create a fantasy of the pirate or things that we've talked about that could happen. But there's something visual about being in a scene that the erotic mind gets into detail, right? It might be a hookup, but there tends to be some emotional kind of component to it. There's this sense of just attuning to what you need and seeing you and anticipating and attention in that.
Yeah, I think there are sort of themes that work really well for most women. There's kind of the scene, I think, for a lot of women of being, it's not terribly politically correct, but of being taken, sort of the dominant male. I think it's really about energy, that something about a man having that sexual energy that is so exciting to women. I mean, romance novels, all the men are alphas. They're all powerful men. Cowboys are a big one, but doctors, executives, gotta say, George, there's no therapists in romantic novels. Sorry about
Not
that.
yet, Lori, not yet.
I think your wife
book.
teased you about that when I was up with you guys, and she was saying, she hadn't planned on marrying a marital therapist.
Not easy sometimes,
maybe,
that's for sure.
Maybe fireman, when she met you, was still part of that fantasy there. Some of it, and this might be a little bit of my argument with why it's problematic, but there aren't a whole lot of books about women with sexual power, with sexual imagination. It's more about he's the expert lover teaching her, she's the virgin, she's innocent, this is all new, it's the awakening. I think, again, it's that moment of awakening that is very exciting. And on the other hand, there's not a whole lot of agency if you can't also see the excitement being a woman with knowledge, being a woman who takes control of it or offers what she wants and stuff like that. So I don't know, even as I say it, I can feel my own political conflict in it.
Well, I hear a lot of that with my clients too. Somebody that lives a life as a feminist and is very proud of that, and yet doesn't want to be that same feminist in the bedroom, and things kind of switch. And again, we're talking about flexibility here, non-judgment. We're just trying to understand how to, for men, it tends to be graphic and visual. You can see the pornography, and that's part of the turn on. It almost sounds like what I hear you saying. There's a self-playing pornography that's happening in that erotic mind, and these different scenes that are happening. Either they were real or they're imagined or from a book, but there's something about just kind of immersing yourself in that erotic kind of imagery that seems to kind of get the engines going.
Yes, I think you've clarified that. Definitely there is putting yourself in that place.
Well, when we come back, let's talk about how can women share that, or are they better off not communicating some of these things with their partner?
I was frustrated that I rarely wanted sex, but I learned there's an FDA-approved pink pill for that Addyi or flibanserin is the #1 prescribed treatment for premenopausal women bothered by low sex drive. Visit addyi.com and complete your consultation to see if Addyi is right for you. Addyi is for premenopausal women with acquired generalized hypoactive low sexual desire disorder, HSDD, who have not had problems with low sexual desire in the past and who have low sexual desire no matter the type of sexual activity, the situation, or the sexual partner. The low sexual desire is troubling to them and is not due to a medical or mental health problem, problems in the relationship, or medicine or other drug use. Addyi is not for use in men or to enhance sexual performance. Your risk of severe low blood pressure and fainting is increased if you drink 1 to 2 standard alcoholic drinks close in time to your Addyi dose. Wait at least 2 hours after drinking before taking Addyi at bedtime. Your risk of severe low blood pressure and fainting is also increased if you take certain prescription, over-the-counter, or herbal medications or have liver problems. Low blood pressure and fainting can happen when you take Addyi, even if you don't drink alcohol or take other medicines. Sleepiness, sometimes serious, can occur. Common side effects include dizziness, nausea, tiredness, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, and dry mouth. See full PI, including box warning, at addyi.com/PI or call 844-PINK-PILL. Visit addyi.com/foreplay.
So we've opened up the door. We're now inside the woman's erotic mind. We're trying to figure out what's going on here, how it bounces around in these different scenes. So Lori's talking about so many of the clients that she's worked with, and we're trying to figure out, like, how do you communicate this with your partner? Is it even helpful to communicate? Is it better off keeping it to your own freedom? And what do you think, Lori?
I think you have to know your partner. Some men are uber jealous. Some men would feel somehow or another excluded if you had a fantasy about somebody else or something else. I think that women talk about, fantasy is part of the experience, and there's also reality. They're looking in the eyes of their partner sometimes. Sometimes they're going back and forth between memories and fantasies and sensual touch that they're experiencing right then. I think all of it is wonderful. I don't think necessarily every time you shut your eyes, it's about being somewhere else. I mean, sometimes you're right in the moment there with your partner experiencing that. And yeah, sometimes you go somewhere. My husband always says to me things like, "What are you thinking about?" Or "You're somewhere else," just when we're even in conversation, let alone in bed. And he's really curious about what's happening inside my mind. But I talk to women whose husbands kind of feel that as an absence. You're somewhere else. You're not with me. What were you saying about being present? Like the fantasy from before might have been a time that you were really alive and aware to that partner. And you're not fantasizing at that time? Say that, George, because I wanted to argue with you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the fantasies that you're going back to, these powerful awakening moments, if we would have a scene in that moment, it wouldn't seem to me that you'd be fantasizing in that scene. You don't need that fantasy because the power of the moment is so strong.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we get every moment can't be that way. So why would your brain not want to get a little boost by kind of getting that jolt from the past or possibility of something in the fantasy? So, I mean, I guess it's helpful what you're talking about, the switching. Like you might need a little some imagery to kind of heighten the moment, and then you're back with your partner, you're present. So it's something that's accentuating. I guess I'm just curious, is it even helpful to share it? I mean, just to keep the erotic secrets in your own mind. I mean, what would be helpful about sharing it?
I mean, I think certainly the helpfulness might be if you want to recreate that scene or create that scene, if it's something you've never done. I mean, our mind is an infinitely creative tool to help us sexually. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can imagine all kinds of things that maybe we would never do, but maybe sharing with our partner something that we think about turns our partner on and turns us on to share it. I think the vulnerability of sharing it is a turn on too.
I love that there's so much good information in this fantasy about the gas pedal and what turns you on. To be able to share that really gives your partner good information about how to help you get more turned on, right? So withholding the information to protect them from hurt or protect you from feeling bad also prevents that good information from being shared.
Yeah, I think that, people judge themselves. I have lots of listeners who write in about lesbian fantasies, women who have lesbian fantasies, and they're not lesbian. And they feel like that's wrong to use those fantasies. One of our listeners, on my advice, I wrote back to her personally and I said, yeah, I think you should share it. And her husband said, why would you not want, I think it was actually she had a fantasy of a threesome, a lesbian and a man. And the man was her husband in her fantasy. And he said, why wouldn't you want multiple people loving you simultaneously? Which was so reassuring, so loving, so accepting. These were people who monogamy was it. They weren't going to act this fantasy out. But kind of that level of acceptance and that level of understanding and interpretation, opened her up. She wasn't ashamed and bad. She could talk about it, and together they could be more excited about it.
And it's so important that you have that safety. I mean, if people want to role play being somebody else, that's great if it works. But if people start to get worried you actually want somebody else because there's a lack of safety or there's distance in a relationship, then the sharing could actually lead to more defensiveness, insecurities, and kind of shutting down. So I do think I think you really need safety to have these conversations.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And if you're going to do a role play, and that's fun because both people are not going to take this personal. I mean, I know you're not a pirate, but you're playing a pirate and we're having fun with it, right? But if a lack of safety leads to, oh, wait a second, my partner really wants someone else and doesn't want me, right? And then it starts to kind of increase fears and pressure. Then the sharing actually becomes counterproductive. So how do couples really have conversations around assessing their levels of safety? Because this is a really risky thing to do, to let your partner into your erotic mind.
It is risky. They could not think it was erotic, or they could think it was, way out of the box, or they could find it. I think the difficulty is they could find it somehow or another they're lacking, especially when women are fantasizing about executives and cowboys and doctors and something that the man may say, I'm a bureaucrat, I'm a therapist. All you therapists out there listening, y'all are great, just for the record. I treasure you all.
I think you're sexy beasts.
Yeah.
Even if the world don't see it.
Yeah, that's right. I think you're sexy beasts. And we know we have a lot of therapists who listen to us.
But if you would throw this into some of these general themes, you have these past powerful awakening moments. You have the powerful partner, executive, cowboy, pirates. You might have a lesbian kind of theme. You might have the woman being in charge and being powerful. And any other themes out there that these erotic mind could just kind of race into?
I think women think about graphic stuff too. They think about being touched in a way that is really attuned. They think about that, seeing their partner. Women dream about men, and women dream about naked men. I mean, I've said this on the podcast, but one of my favorite things to do is come up with coffee in the morning and watch my husband shower. It's a sexy thing. It's not necessarily just a fantasy, but I think about it during the day. What he looked like. That is part of my mind and how I get engaged. So
I think most men can relate to what you're saying. I mean, every man at times has thought about a previous episode to kind of get more turned on, or thinks about something they've seen, or there's some fantasy about it, So we're not that different after all, Laura, I guess is what I'm hearing you say.
No, I think men and women are very different in how they fantasize, in my experience, with what women tell me and with what men tell me.
What's the difference?
Oh, man, we got to do another podcast. We're out of time, George. This is another episode.
Well, we opened the door. We kind of took a step into that woman's erotic mind here. And Lori, as usual, is telling us there's a lot more to talk about that we haven't even scratched the surface here. So yes, another podcast on going deeper into the erotic mind. But I am leaving this conversation just appreciating the freedom and how important that is. And to start to shed the shackles of kind of all of these tapes that can play around how bad it is, or try to kind of, this is a place where people are designed to just wander. It's so expansive, and there's a lot going on here. So I think couples that could learn how to have more conversations in safe, non-threatening ways, it just opens up so much more space for their relationship.
I agree. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Keep it erotic and hot.
Call in your questions to the Foreplay question voicemail. Dial 833-MY-4PLAY. That's 833-4-PLAY. And we'll use the questions for our mailbag episodes. All content is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as a substitute for therapy by a licensed clinician or as medical advice from a doctor. This podcast is copyrighted by Foreplay Media.